In ancient Babylon, around 4,000 years ago, there was no Wall Street, but there was breeding. Some popular finance histories point to the Sumerian word mash, used both for interest and for a young lamb, as evidence of how directly this culture linked money to livestock. If you lent someone a cow, you expected the cow back, plus the calf it produced while they had it. They viewed money as a living, biological entity that should breed in the dark. But here is the well-documented part. The Code of Hammurabi actually capped how much interest lenders could charge, because rulers realized that once money starts working, it eventually works faster than any human being ever could. Most of us are still stuck in the pre-Babylonian mindset. We think wealth is about how hard we work, but the survival gap isn't about your hustle. It's the cold, mathematical tipping point where the calves your money is producing start to outweigh the work you are doing. I'm Marvin. I spend way too much time obsessing over financial data, human psychology, and the hidden mechanisms of wealth, so you don't have to. Today, we're doing a deep dive, no sugarcoating, into the exact dollar amount and the specific habits required to reach the moment your money takes over. I've talked before about the high-income poverty trap. You can earn $200,000 a year and still be a slave to your desk because your burn rate matches your earn rate. Sarah is rich on paper. She has the title and the car, but she hasn't reached the survival gap because her money isn't allowed to breed. She's spending the calves as fast as they're born. Our brains are hardwired for immediate status signaling. We've been conditioned to trade our most precious asset, time, for depreciating assets like leased SUVs. To cross the gap, you have to survive the boredom phase. This is where quiet wealth is built. It's the period where you're investing. But you don't see the results yet. Most people quit right here because they don't see the fire. Here's a version of Sarah's numbers that makes the boredom phase concrete. If she invests $1,500 a month starting from zero at a historical average return, her portfolio might sit around $19,000 after her first year. It barely looks like anything happened. After 5 years, still investing that same amount every month, she might be somewhere around $115,000. The portfolio has grown, but most of that growth so far is still just her own contributions stacking up. This is a part almost nobody shows on social media because it isn't exciting. It's the part where the graph still looks almost like a straight line. Now picture a version of that same portfolio, same contributions, 10 years further down the line, somewhere in the back half of that decade. The math quietly flips. The dollar amount her portfolio grows by in a single year, from returns alone, starts to rival and then exceed the dollar amount she's contributing from her paycheck that same year. That flip is the survival gap. Nobody rings a bell when it happens. Most people don't even notice the exact month, but it is a real, calculable moment. And once it happens, it tends to keep happening every year after, assuming the money stays invested. Here's the part that breaks the "you need a huge salary" myth completely. According to Ramsey Solutions' National Study of Millionaires, one of the largest surveys of actual millionaires ever conducted, only about 31% of them average $100,000 a year or more over their entire career. A full third never earned a six-figure income in any single working year. Only 15% held a senior executive title. The most common occupations among the millionaires surveyed were things like engineer, accountant, teacher, and management, not hedge fund manager. Roughly 8 out of 10 of them invested consistently in a workplace retirement plan, and about 8 out of 10 said they did not receive any meaningful inheritance. Nearly all of them, over 90%, credited their wealth to consistent habits and hard work, not a big salary. The income wasn't the variable that mattered most. The habit of consistently feeding the breeding money year after year was. This is exactly why the survival gap isn't reserved for high earners. A disciplined saver on a modest income can cross their own gap sooner than a six-figure earner who never starts, because the crossover depends on your invested balance and your consistency, not your job title. This crossover is the survival gap. To calculate yours, We have to look at the hidden mechanisms that quietly push it back, even for people who are technically doing everything right. The convenience tax. I've analyzed the data on invisible leaks before. That $15 a day on convenience apps is actually about $5,000 a year that isn't breeding. Invested consistently over 30 years at a historical average return, that range of contribution can plausibly land somewhere in the mid to high six figures, depending on the exact return you get. That's a meaningfully different retirement date, not just a rounding error. The real return, you have to account for the tax drag. If you feel rich because your portfolio is up 20% for the year, but you're sitting in a taxable brokerage account with no tax advantage strategy, a real chunk of that gain, depending on your bracket and how long you held the asset, is going to government before it ever reaches your pocket. Your breeding coins are being harvested before they can mature. But here's the mechanism almost nobody talks about, and it might be the single biggest one on this list. It's called the behavior gap. According to Dalbar's long-running annual research, and separately confirmed by Morningstar's Mind the Gap studies, the average investor consistently earns less than the very funds they're invested in, not because the funds underperform, because of when investors buy and sell them. In 2024, for example, Dalbar found the average equity fund investor earned about 16.5%, while the S&P 500 itself returned around 25%, a gap of roughly 8.5 percentage points in a single year. Zoomed out over 20 years, that gap has averaged somewhere around 1 percentage point annually. That 1 percentage point sounds small. It isn't. On a $1 million portfolio held for 20 years, a 1-point annual difference in return is the difference between ending up with roughly $5.3 million and roughly $6.3 million, according to one commonly cited comparison. The mechanism is almost always the same: selling during a down out of fear, then buying back in later after the recovery has already happened at a higher price. The market didn't cost investors that gap. Their own reaction to the market did. You don't have to go back far for a real example. In February and March of 2020, the S&P 500 fell by roughly a third in about 5 weeks, one of the fastest drops in its history. Anyone who sold near the bottom out of panic locked in that loss. But the index fully recovered to a new all-time high by that August, the same year. The people who kept contributing on schedule through the drop, without touching anything, ended up fine. The people who sold near the bottom and waited for things to feel safe again before buying back, and were often the ones who missed a recovery entirely. Same market, very different outcomes, based entirely on behavior during about 8 weeks out of an investing lifetime that spans decades. This connects to something financial planners call sequence of returns risk. It's not just whether the market goes up over time. It's the order those ups and downs happen in relative to your own timeline. A downturn early in your investing life barely matters, because you have decades for it to recover. The same downturn happening right as you're relying on that money matters enormously. The behavior gap and sequence risk are cousins. One is about panicking at the wrong moment. The other is about bad luck and timing, and both are reasons just invest and don't touch it is harder in practice than it sounds, and more valuable than people give it credit for. People always ask me, Marvin, what's the exact dollar amount? The answer is boring but brutal. It's roughly 25 times your annual expenses. This is where compounding finally catches fire. At this stage, your money can generate enough calves to fund a large share of your life without you ever touching the original cows. That 25 times number comes from a roughly 4% annual withdrawal rate, a commonly cited historical guideline, not a guarantee. Since actual market returns vary year to year, and sequence of returns matters a great deal, exactly like we just talked about. But the survival gap happens before that, often years before. It's the moment your annual investment growth exceeds your annual savings contribution. If you save $10,000 a year and your $200,000 portfolio grows by 7% that year, it made $14,000. For the first time in your life, your money did more work than you did that year. That is the moment the momentum shifts. So here's how to actually find your own survival gap. and protect it once you get there. First, add up your current invested balance. Everything actually in the market, not sitting in cash. Second, multiply that number by your realistic expected return, historically average in the high single digits for a diversified portfolio, though your own results will vary. That gives you your projected growth for this year in dollars. Third, write down how much you're actually contributing from your own paycheck this year. Fourth, compare the two numbers. Once your projected annual growth consistently outpaces your annual contribution, you've crossed your survival gap. Fifth, and this is a step the behavior gap research says most people skip, automate the whole thing so the decision to keep investing doesn't depend on your mood during the next downturn. For most people starting from zero, that crossover tends to land somewhere in the range of a decade or more consistent investing, depending heavily on your savings rate and the size of your starting balance. There's no universal number because your inputs and your discipline are not universal. Escaping the rat race isn't a loud event. Nobody around me noticed when it happened for me, and that was kind of the point. It happens through minimalist money rules and consistent habits, repeated for years by people whose income, according to the research we just walked through, usually wasn't the deciding factor at all. If you want your money to work harder than you have to stop working for your things. Stop renting the modern-day pineapple, the flashy car, the oversized house, the status symbols that keep you rich on paper, but broke in reality. I put together a specific plan for a debt-free journey that actually works. You can watch that video right here to get started. Don't forget to subscribe if you're ready to stop guessing and start obsessing over the data that actually builds wealth. I'm Marvin, and I'll see you in the next one.